The Agenda with Michael Knight on News Radio 560 KPQ and KPQ.com.
At 1:34 in the afternoon, we meet a very special guest. His name is Kurt Soper. Not Clint at all, Kurt Soper. And he's the executive director of the Chelan Douglas Land Trust. So, Kurt, welcome back to the show. It seems like I've met you before, but apparently we haven't met.
I think maybe early in my tenure we chatted once.
There we go.
That was a couple of years ago. So.
Well, anyway, congratulations on the work you've been doing up by Lake Wenatchee. Let's talk about the project, because it's a big one.
It is a big one. Big one in size, 3,714 acres. That's a lot of ground. But more importantly, it's big in its scope and its impact. This is one of the most popular year-round recreational trails that we have in north central Washington, or across the state for that matters. It's groomed. People ski in the winter. This time of year, a lot of hikers and mountain bikers. So it's a really popular place for recreation. But it also has Nason Creek running along one side of it, which is a tremendously valuable salmon habitat, really the best tributary in the whole Wenatchee system for our native salmon.
So for people looking at the Lake Wenatchee area right now, what area are we talking about?
Yeah, if you go to the state park and you stand at the beach and you look across the lake, you're looking at Nason Ridge. So that was one of the motivators, too. There was some concern in terms of a proposed timber sale, which was improved, that would have taken a whole lot of trees off of that ridge and changed the viewscape from the lake, which so many people, it's one of the most popular state parks that we have in Washington, and, of course, for all the residents around the lake as well. So
the land that you were in the process of rescuing is held by Weyerhaeuser.
It's owned by Weyerhaeuser, that's correct.
And if they didn't sell it to you, then they were going to use it for what they use it for, right? Well,
they had justifiably and correctly so. They're in the timber products business, and so they had a planned timber sale which had gotten the permits to go forward. But I want to give them a lot of credit. They also listened to the community, which was concerned about it, and they gave the conservation community time to put together a possible transaction. So they've been very much a willing partner.
So you made an announcement, but the deal is not quite done yet. What's lacking? I guess money.
Yeah, well, the announcement was that at least there is a purchase and sale agreement to acquire the property, and that purchase and sale agreement is between Weyerhaeuser and our partner organization called the Western Rivers Conservancy. So they're stepping up in a big way. The transaction hasn't closed yet. It's still, I think, a couple months off, but the opportunity to preserve the property and preserve its values is there. What we need to do now is out of the gate, the Land Trust has a goal locally of raising $1 million over the next 5 or 6 months. And that is sort of what we need to do locally, and then those would be privately raised dollars, and then we can use that money to leverage other grants, whether from foundations, maybe from the state of Washington, from other fund sources. And we know it'll take a couple of years to do the whole thing, but if we be successful in the next 4 to 5 months in raising $1 million locally, we'll be well on our way.
And how much do you need total?
We have to talk to Western Rivers Conservancy about that. So we're not a party to the agreement. I actually don't know what the purchase price is, but it's certainly more than $1 million.
Okay, let's assume that the money's in the bank and you've paid Weyerhaeuser. Mm-hmm. Now, what have we done? What have we accomplished by saving this ridge, by saving this area, by saving that creek?
Yeah, what we've done is have it in permanent conservation status, which means it can never be subdivided, developed, put into homes. It's always there as a recreational resource. And the creek itself is protected. Clean water, the salmon habitat, we know that those features are going to be preserved forever. And this has been a 20-year effort. It's been on the radar screen of the Chelan Douglas Land Trust for more than 20 years, and through about 3 different ownerships. And there's always been the threat, if you will, of heavy logging, subdivision, home development, that kind of thing. And we're not an organization that's opposed to development at all. We just think there are some places that are better suited for it. And this is probably one of the places that would be good to preserve as a recreation area.
But to pursue a project like this for several years takes the type of tenacity that few people have. Where do you guys get your stick-to-itiveness?
We have a good focus on our mission, and we don't drift from that. And we also have a lot of supporters who are very familiar with this property. A lot of our members use this property. So they've done a great job of keeping us informed of what was going on with respect to possible future management of the place. So I got in my first 3 weeks on the job here a couple of years ago, I certainly had a lot of folks contact me and talking about the Nason Ridge project.
So it's been on some people's minds now for some time.
Yeah, we really got engaged right around 1999. The previous owner had also a large timber sale planned, same kind of thing. The local community got together, worked with the land trust, and at that time, we worked with the previous owner and did a timber thinning rather than a clear cut, which was quite acceptable to the community. And the company at that time, Longview Fiber, did a great job with it. But then fast forward to today, and Longview Fiber sold all their holdings to Weyerhaeuser, and Weyerhaeuser kind of went back to the idea of a clear cut on the ridgetop, a heavy harvest. But again, they listened to the community when the community expressed concern, and gave us a chance to put a deal together.
The fact that the ridge and the mountain and the lake and the creek are all tied together, speak about how intricately they are tied and how one affects the other dramatically.
Yeah, so Nason Ridge runs right along the edge of the lake there, and you got about half of it drains right into the lake.
So that's big deal.
So that's big deal. If you have a forested slope, and the slopes are steep, I will say, too. It's very steep, so there's concern. Of the previous logging operation, there was a landslide, and so I know some of the local residents are very concerned about that. But when you have it all that ground forested with vegetation, then things like the impact of heavy rains or heavy snow melt is much reduced. On the other side of the ridge, opposite from the lake, it flows into Nason Creek, which, again, is this tremendous salmon spawning habitat. And a great resource, very important to the local tribes and to recreational fishermen as well. And so to make sure that this property is the vegetation is still going to be there means that the health of the lake and the creek are at stake here.
And those healthy lakes and creeks contribute to everything. I mean, all the way down the creek to the river to the Columbia, the incredibly complicated ecology is one is always affected by the other as it changes.
It's all connected. And this is near the headwaters. This is basically pretty close to the headwaters of Nason Creek, so this is kind of where it gets its start. But yeah, it flows into the Wenatchee, which flows into the Columbia, which goes down to the ocean. So you're right. It's an important tributary, and how we manage this particular piece of ground has a big impact downstream.
And so what happens in that creek actually happens in the river in a way, doesn't it?
That's right.
In terms of the health of the river and the health of the fish in the river.
What we do here kind of sets the tone for the whole rest of the stream.
What sort of support do you get at the Chelan Douglas Land Trust? What do the people in this town say to you and about you?
Yeah, well, they say, first of all, we have a tremendous membership base, about 1,700 dues-paying members. It's only $35 a year to be a member, and I think people consider that a bargain because that helps provide access to the foothills trails and places like Nason Ridge, and just tremendous support. I've only been in town about 2 years, and my most pleasant surprise has been the respect that the Land Trust has and the support it gets from its members, both here in the community but also statewide.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If this passes and somebody else buys that or it turns itself into a cutting field, then the opportunity is lost forever. Is that correct?
That's right. There's no guarantee that we'll be successful. We do have to do the lion's share of the fundraising. But this is a great opportunity. A lot of people have been waiting for this day, the Land Trust included. So we are full steam ahead.
I know you probably have financing lined up, but if someone wants to send you $20 or $20,000, how do they proceed?
Two ways they can do that. They can go to the Land Trust website, or they can go to savenasonridge.org. And there's a very easy way to contribute, and people have been doing that. We announced this about a week ago, and very encouraged by the response we've gotten so far.
There's been a lot of work done in Nason Creek over the years to restore what had been lost. So we're not talking about a pristine area. We're talking about a restored area that's approaching being pristine.
That's right. Some portions, a very big piece of property, over 3,700 acres. So some of it is in mature forest. Some of it is not. A lot of it is not. Has been heavily managed in the past. But we are taking the long-term view here. So this is an opportunity to manage the property. Perhaps totally appropriate. There needs to be some improved forest management. One of the concerns, of course, the community has is fire. And if you don't manage a forest appropriately, if you just essentially put a fence around it, lock it up, leave it alone.
Sooner or later it'll burn down.
Sooner or later it'll burn down and spread to the park and to the many beautiful homes along the lake. So there will need to be good, appropriate forest management applied to this property in the future. That'll include some timber harvest.
One of the things that comes with fishery restoration is people have to understand how fragile just the banks of the creek are.
That's right.
Everything contributes. Now, I'm talking like I know what I'm talking about, but I learned sitting in this chair from other people that the health of the river and the health of the creeks is very fragile, and so many things are in the balance.
It is, and I think the biggest concern we have in Nason Creek is sedimentation. The substrate is there, the fish are there. What could really screw things up, or the way we can improve things, a better way of looking at it, is if we make sure that there's not increased sedimentation when we have big rain on snow events or fires in the area. And so the best way to reduce sedimentation is to have a great buffer along the creek itself and appropriate but not too heavy-handed forest management on the slopes upstream.
We had reports of an elk walking through the neighborhoods in town today, and I thought to myself, well, if the elk are walking through our town, certainly they're at Lake Wenatchee. They're all over the place. So God knows who's living up in the hills. You have a responsibility to all the animals that live there that make it their home.
That's right, and this place gets a heavy wildlife use. So Rocky Mountain elk, cougars, bobcats, all kinds of critters that call this place home.
And so this is their home too. Now you're ensuring that it'll always be there.
That's right. That's part of the plan.
How long do you have to raise all the money that you need?
Yeah, so I think in the first 4 or 5 months out of the gate here, we need to raise $1 million. And then I think probably a realistic goal would be to have the entire property secured and paid off in 3 or 4 years.
The people of this town, I think, probably know the name of your organization, Chelan Douglas Land Trust. But you work in conjunction with other people who are restoring the river, or in the cases of the Western Rivers Conservancy, a group I'd never heard of. You work hand in glove with these people, keeping yourself organized and busy.
We do, and we're delighted to be partnering with the Western Rivers Conservancy. Frankly, the land trust, we're a smallish local land trust. We did not have the financial resources to meet the terms that Weyerhaeuser would have. They're a big international conglomerate organization. And Western Rivers Conservancy is located in Portland, Oregon. And we were delighted that they wanted to participate here and be a partner. And they are taking a risk here by taking the lead in negotiating with Weyerhaeuser and coming up with the financing. And I think this community is delighted to have them here and working right here in our backyard.
So there are groups like this that are moneyed, experienced, have legal teams, and have the experience and know how to go head-to-head with a corporation and make a deal.
There are, and I think that the fact that the Western Rivers Conservancy wanted to become engaged in this particular project says, when they have a choice around the country, around the West, where they could be working, says a lot, first, about this community and what they perceive as the commitment of the land trust and the folks who call this part of the state home to make this project happen, and the quality of the site itself. They can see that it has tremendous natural resource values and is something that they can raise money around and work with other partners so that they can be taken out of their financial commitment.
There are a lot of state lands around here. There's federal lands around here. There's national forests. There's every conceivable type of patchwork of county and municipal ownership of the land. But there are lands like this that we're talking about by a well-established lake and a very well-established recreational area that was in jeopardy. Are there other areas in jeopardy that you have to see to?
Yeah, there are. We have at any one time a long list of potential projects. And, to have any 2 or 3 projects come down, you have to be juggling about 15 to 20 of them.
But you guys seem to act quietly behind the scenes in a way. Isn't that your personality?
We do. We take a very professional approach, and we respect the privacy of landowners. And one thing we absolutely never do is do anything that's unwilling on the part of the landowner. We have absolutely no interest in forcing someone to sell their property or to put it into conservation by any stretch of the imagination. And we're also taking on kind of a new approach to some projects. So another project that we announced here maybe 2-3 months ago is called the Kashmir Canyons Preserve, which is outside of Kashmir, as the name suggests. And in that case, the property is going to remain in private ownership, but the land trust will have what's called a conservation easement on the property, and which will also allow the public to go out and use, and in this case, to hike and enjoy the property. So we have a lot of different tools at our disposal, and we've gotten good over the years at knowing how they work. And I'd like to think we're pretty good listeners in terms of landowners and what their desires are for their property.
You've probably heard of the organization Our Valley, Our Future.
Yes.
One of their conclusions is that the future of this valley is pretty much what we see right now, the valley, the area. If you build on it, if you burn it down, if you don't manage it, then the future of the valley is very much in question. But if you preserve it and if you capitalize on it, then the future of the valley probably will be based upon the success of us managing what we have and preserving what is in jeopardy.
That's right.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and we were a part of the Our Valley, Our Future process and continue to be in terms of implementation. And I know one of the 5 or 6 sort of top-line items that came out of that process was access to outdoor recreation and how important that is to people that live in the valley. We at the Land Trust have heard that many times over the years when we've done surveys and such. And also, the thing that people forget is it's not just fun and great to have access to outdoor recreation, because it is, and it's a great place to live and raise a family because of that. But it's also
an industry, too.
It's an industry, too, that you're exactly right. And it is an economic driver.
Yes.
And, in fact, the amount of money nationally that comes in from outdoor recreation-related activities, I believe, is $373 billion a year, which is like something like 3% of the economy in this country. And in the state of Washington, it's even higher. I think something like 75% of the people who live here identify themselves as outdoor recreation enthusiasts, people who use trail systems. So I think the more of that we can deliver to the public, it makes our community a better place to live, and it also helps our local economy.
Also, as I've talked on the show so many times, people always talk about the future when they sit in the studio, with a caveat that it does not disturb in any way the so-called quality of life that people expect. So they want everything to change and they want it to get better, but they don't want to lose anything in the translation. And that's a very difficult scenario. It's
a fine line that we have to walk as a community. I think up to now, I think the Wenatchee Valley has kind of got it right. The conservation work that's done in the foothills, while the city has still been allowed to grow, I think is a good model that we can replicate. Other communities, I think, are jealous of and can be replicated. But you're exactly right. That's always difficult. And like I said earlier, we're not an organization that is opposed to development. We support it. It helps drive the economy. I just think that it makes sense to do that wisely and to identify the places that are close to existing infrastructure. They're going to be less expensive to maintain as far as development infrastructure is concerned. And also recognize there are some places that are better to be set aside and have access as outdoor recreation facilities.
What do you think's next for your organization, your trust? What projects do you have? I'm sure you have some on the back burner.
We do. We're real excited about a couple of projects in Douglas County, which is, of course, very, very different than Chelan County, kind of our two areas of emphasis are Chelan County and Douglas County. And up to now, and the Land Trust has been around for about 33 years. Much of that work has been on the Chelan County side, which is great. There's certainly a greater population there. But we have some things going on in Douglas County that we're excited about, some more kind of dry land, shrub steppe kinds of habitats, no less important as far as wildlife habitat, just a different suite of wildlife. So we'll have to come back in a year or so and tell you what we've got going on in Douglas County.
The type of animal that loves the Palouse, right?
That's right. Well, one critter that we're really excited, there are two native grouse species, sharp-tailed grouse and sage grouse. They were once very, very common throughout the West, and now they're both really in big trouble. But Douglas County has really the finest populations remaining in our state are right here in Douglas County.
And are those game birds that are being hunted today?
Not today, because they are too low in numbers. And we would love to see the day come in the future when they could be hunted again.
So your plans are to preserve their habitat and give them another chance?
That's it. You got it.
What else is on your list that I should know about?
Let's see.
Here's a question that I had in my mind. You said Douglas is so different from Chelan County. In your mind, how is it different?
Well, it's different in just about every way you can imagine. The obvious one is that a lot fewer trees in Douglas County, a lot more trees in Chelan County, so it's drier. And it's also a different type of economy. It's much more dryland wheat is sort of the predominating use, where we have irrigated agriculture is such a big driver here on the Chelan County side. I think the outdoor recreation industry is much stronger and in place on the Chelan County side. I think there's real potential for that in Douglas County, but it's not there yet. But they're both beautiful. They're just beautiful in different ways.
So this area is going to grow somehow. That can't be debated.
That's right.
But do you think it's going to grow on the Douglas side?
I do. I think particularly in kind of here close to town, I think there's more opportunity for expansion and development on the other side of the river, on the Douglas County side, than there is on the Chelan County side. That's just a geographical influence, I think.
Our guest, our very special guest, is Clint Soper. He's the executive director of the Chelan Douglas Land Trust. We're talking about the recent announcement of the purchase up by Lake Wenatchee and from Weyerhaeuser. But once again, Kurt, just tell the folks who listen and hear a lot about the Chelan Douglas Land Trust, but how can they participate financially in your projects?
I think the best way is to become a member, even if it's at the very beginning level of $35 a year. And by doing so, you'll start to you'll see a lot of your neighbors are members already, a lot of your friends. You'll learn more about current projects that we're working on, about projects that we finally bring to the finish line that have been in the works for many years. Great volunteer activities. So people who can't afford to give a lot financially, we totally understand that, but people can come out and give in different ways. They can give it with sweat equity. And some will choose to participate at a large level financially, but you don't have to. That's up to each individual. But I think just becoming a basic member is a great place to start. Or stop by the office. We're about 2 blocks down the street here from your studios.
You're right downtown.
Right downtown. So, and we're open normal business hours, and to be happy to talk to people about what we do.
And it also gives the citizens a stake in what they see every day, and that's beautiful.
That's right. We all care about the community we live in, and we like to think that we contribute to improving the quality of life here.
Clint Soper, he's the executive director of the Chelan Douglas Land Trust. Thanks a lot for all.